Welcome back to Podcast Rockstars, the show that helps business leaders become podcasting legends. I'm your host, Dawn Lidwell, the founder of Lidwell Writing Services, and today I'm sharing how podcasters can effectively repurpose their podcast episodes into blog post content.
You're listening to Podcast Rockstars, the show helping business leaders become podcast legends. Now, here's your host, Dawn Lidwell.
Hey there, Rockstars. So today I want to share my opinion on podcasters turning their audio content into long-form blog post articles. But before I dive in, I want to take you back to a period of time when some of our clients first started asking us if we would write their show notes as blog posts instead of the overview style that we specialize in. A few years ago, I had a few clients and people within the podcasting community reach out to me asking what I thought about long-form blog post style show notes. Of course, since my company specializes in short-form overview style show notes, my initial thought was, no way, you don't want to turn your podcast into a blog post. But even though it went against my belief on what podcast show notes should be, and honestly, it still does, I spent a few months experimenting a little with this concept. And here's what I've concluded. Podcasters need to keep in mind the type of audience they are trying to target. Are you trying to target listeners or blog readers? Chances are most of your podcast listeners tune into your show from their smartphone or smart speaker. According to a recent study conducted by Edison Research, 84% of the U.S. population over the age of 12 own a smartphone, and 23% own a smart speaker device such as an Amazon Alexa or Google Home. In fact, their research found that the average smart speaker user owns more than one device. We'll include a link to these research findings as well as a pretty impressive infographic we found that was created by musicoomph.com in our show notes at lidwellwriting.com/podcast. Now, while many people may read blog posts from their mobile devices too, that doesn't necessarily mean that your listeners do. In fact, one of the main reasons why podcast listening is becoming so popular is because people enjoy tuning into your content while they're doing other things like walking, driving, working out, or washing dishes. And let's be honest, many people today only skim long-form articles and blog posts, gathering only the information they were curious about without actually reading the entire piece. This is one of the many reasons why we currently focus exclusively on writing overview-style show notes. There's something to be said about skimmable content, especially for the podcast listener. But that's not to say that you should stop creating blog posts once you launch your podcast. However, I would recommend refraining from simply turning your audio content into long-form blog posts, hence giving away all of the juicy details in each episode. Instead, get creative. Ask yourself how you could repurpose your audio content in a way that would be engaging for your blog readers. Try using a complimentary piece based on your podcast episode. Perhaps pull a few key takeaways that you and your guests want to really drive home and write a blog post on those. Think of the blog post as a related piece of content to your podcast episode, which means similar, but not exactly the same. And remember, you can always reference your podcast episodes in your blog copy to direct your readers to your podcast page where they can listen to the full episode. If you'd like to see an example of how we are repurposing our podcast content into an effective blog post, head over to lidwellwriting.com/blog to see some of our most recent articles. So, Rockstar, how are you turning your podcast episodes into multiple pieces of content? Join me in our exclusive Podcast Rockstars Facebook group to connect with me and other podcasters, share your ideas, and ask your most pressing questions. We'll include a link to our Facebook group in the show notes of this episode, So head on over to lidwellwriting.com/podcast to join our community. We'd love to hear from you, learn from you, and grow with you as avid podcast fans and business owners. See you in the next episode.
Thanks for tuning in to Podcast Rockstars, sponsored by Lidwell Writing Services, because a great podcast deserves great show notes. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and leave us a review, and remember to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Join our exclusive Podcast Rockstars Facebook community to connect with other podcasting legends. In the Facebook community, you can ask your most pressing questions and tell us who you would love to hear on the show. And if you're ready to experience the power of great show notes, contact Dawn at lidwellwriting.com.